So you want to own a trucking company. You look out at the interstate highways crisscrossing the continent and you see an endless, rolling river of money. You see a country where over 70% of all domestic freight tonnage is moved exclusively by trucks. You figure that as long as people need food on their grocery store shelves, clothes in their closets, and boxes delivered to their front doors, you can buy a shiny Class 8 diesel tractor, hire a driver, slap your logo on the cabin door, and let the American supply chain print cash for your business. It looks like the ultimate asset-backed, blue-collar wealth engine. It is not. The modern commercial trucking industry is one of the most brutally hyper-competitive, structurally unstable, and financially unforgiving margin traps on the face of the earth. It is an economic meat grinder operating under the rules of near-perfect competition, where your primary asset depreciates by the mile, your largest variable cost fluctuates wildly based on geopolitical chaos, and your pricing power can be completely wiped out overnight by an automated freight broker algorithm. By the end of this video, you will understand the exact financial architecture that governs the logistics world. You will learn the hidden structural difference between the contract market and the volatile spot market. You will understand how the invisible enemy known as deadhead mileage quietly drains the bank accounts of thousands of small carriers every single day. And you will see why the transition from driving a truck to owning a trucking company is a psychological and economic barrier that causes thousands of enthusiastic entrepreneurs to go bankrupt every single year. Let us begin with the brutal reality of the asset capital expenditure trap. To enter this game, you need a commercial truck. We are not talking about a consumer pickup truck. We are talking about a Class 8 heavy-duty commercial vehicle, typically a Freightliner, a Peterbilt, a Kenworth, or a Volvo. A brand new day cab or sleeper tractor will easily cost you anywhere from $160,000 to over $220,000. If you want to actually haul anything, you also need to purchase a trailer. A standard 53-foot dry van trailer costs around $45,000 to $55,000, while a specialized temperature-controlled refrigerated trailer, or reefer, will run you $80,000 to $100,000 due to the complex diesel-powered cooling unit attached to the front. If you do not have $250,000 in liquid cash sitting around, you are going to have to finance this equipment through a commercial lender. Because commercial trucking is statistically viewed as a high-risk enterprise, your interest rate is not going to look like a standard home mortgage. You are looking at commercial equipment loan rates that easily hit 10, 12, or even 15% for a new business authority. This means before your truck even starts its engine, before it burns a single drop of fuel or rolls an inch down the highway, your business is saddled with a mandatory fixed overhead payment of $3,000 to $5,000 every single month per truck. And the financial pain of owning that equipment starts the exact second you drive it off the dealership lot. Commercial trucks depreciate at a terrifying non-linear velocity. A truck is not like real estate. It is a mechanical wear item that consumes itself to generate revenue. The life expectancy of a modern commercial diesel engine before it requires a catastrophic, hyper-expensive mechanical overhaul is roughly 500,000 to 750,000 miles. A long-haul over-the-road truck easily logs 100,000 to 120,000 miles per year. This means your $250,000 asset is losing tens of thousands of dollars in equity every 12 months, hurtling toward a mechanical cliff where it will require a massive engine rebuild that can easily cost $30,000. To make matters worse, modern environmental regulations have forced truck manufacturers to install incredibly complex, hypersensitive emissions control systems, including diesel particulate filters, exhaust gas recirculation valves, and selective catalytic reduction systems that rely on diesel exhaust fluid. These modern emission systems are the absolute bane of a trucking company owner's existence. They are mechanical ticking time bombs that are notorious for failing constantly. When an emission sensor malfunctions, the truck's onboard computer automatically enters what is known as a derate mode, systematically cutting the engine's power and forcing the driver to limp into a specialized dealership at 5 miles per hour. Your multi-thousand-dollar a month asset is instantly immobilized. Your customer's load is violently delayed, and you are hit with a $4,000 repair bill for a single broken plastic sensor, all while your fixed financing costs continue to tick away with zero mercy. But the equipment financing is just the first layer of the fixed cost jail that a trucking company owner resides in. To legally operate a commercial trucking business in the United States, you have to establish your own operating authority through the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, which means obtaining your USDOT and MC numbers. The moment your application hits the public registry, your phone will explode with hundreds of spam calls from predatory compliance companies, but that is nothing compared to the shock of commercial insurance. Insurance is the absolute silent killer of the small trucking company, because a loaded 80,000-pound semi-truck moving down an interstate highway at 70 miles per hour is essentially a rolling weapon of mass destruction, capable of causing millions of dollars in civil liability during a multi-car accident. Insurance companies price their premiums with extreme aggression. If you are a brand new trucking company with a fresh operating authority and no years of safety data to prove you are a responsible operator, commercial auto liability, cargo insurance, and physical damage coverage will easily cost you $12,000 to $25,000 per year per truck. The insurance companies routinely demand massive upfront deposits, forcing you to bleed thousands of dollars in cash before you can even legal book your first load. Add to that the mandatory regulatory overhead, the International Fuel Tax Agreement registration, the Unified Carrier Registration fees, the heavy highway vehicle use tax known as Form 2290, and the monthly subscription costs for mandatory electronic logging devices that track your driver's every movement via GPS to ensure strict federal hours of service compliance. You are trapped in a high fixed cost cage, and the only way to escape that cage is to keep the wheels of that truck turning relentlessly. This brings us to the operational reality of variable costs, where the largest and most volatile monster you will ever face is diesel fuel. A fully loaded Class 8 tractor trailer weighs 80,000 pounds and possesses the aerodynamic profile of a literal brick wall moving through the atmosphere. Because of this, the average fuel efficiency of a modern commercial truck is an abysmal 6 to 6.5 miles per gallon. Let us look at the brutal mathematics of that efficiency. If your truck drives a standard 100,000 miles in a year, it will consume roughly 16,600 gallons of diesel fuel. If diesel fuel prices are sitting at $4 a gallon, your annual fuel expense for that single truck is $66,400. If geopolitical tensions flare up, a refinery goes offline, or OPEC decides to slash oil production, and diesel spikes to $5.50 a gallon, your fuel cost instantly explodes to over $91,000 for the exact same distance. That $25,000 variance represents the entire profit margin of the vehicle. In the trucking industry, there is a mechanism designed to protect carriers from this volatility, known as the fuel surcharge, when you have a stable, institutional world of contract freight, hauling dedicated lanes for massive corporations like Walmart, Target, or Home Depot. These shippers include a mathematically standardized fuel surcharge clause in the contract. As fuel prices rise, the shipper automatically pays you an extra set number of cents per mile to offset the cost. But to secure those lucrative, stable contract freight agreements, you need to possess immense scale. Shippers want to deal with mega fleets like Swift, J.B. Hunt, or Schneider, companies that can guarantee hundreds of trucks a day and possess deep institutional legal departments. If you are a small trucking company with 5, 10, or 20 trucks, you are almost entirely excluded from the contract market. Instead, you are forced to survive in the wild, unregulated, hyper-volatile world of the freight spot market. The spot market is a real-time digital auction house where excess freight that is not covered by long-term contracts is sold to the lowest bidder. It is an environment governed by the purest laws of supply and demand, and it is where the true economy of owning a trucking company becomes a psychological war. To find work on the spot market, you use digital load boards like DAT-T or TruckStop. You look at the boards and see a manufacturer in Chicago who needs a truck to haul 40,000 pounds of industrial machinery to Dallas. If there are 100 hungry trucking companies sitting in Chicago with empty trucks all competing for that exact same load, the price of that freight will plummet. The shipper or the freight broker holds all the leverage. They will post the load at an insultingly low rate, knowing that some desperate owner-operator whose insurance payment is due tomorrow will completely cave and take the load for pennies over the bare cost of the diesel fuel just to keep their business afloat for one more week. This brings us to the controversial role of the middleman, the freight broker. Freight brokers are the master matchmakers of the logistics industry. They sit between the corporate shipper who has the product and the small trucking company who has the physical truck. A broker will secure a contract from a shipper to move a load for $3,000. They will then turn around, log onto the digital load boards, and try to find a small carrier to haul that exact same load for $2,000, pocketing the $1,000 difference as pure profit without ever touching a piece of cargo, owning a truck, or risking $1 in equipment maintenance. Small trucking company owners routinely view freight brokers as parasitic entities that actively suppress their margins. But the reality is a matter of asymmetric information and market leverage. The broker understands exactly how desperate the carriers are on any given day in any given city, and they use that data to orchestrate a continuous reverse auction where the carriers bid against one another, driving the per-mile freight rates down to the absolute economic floor. To survive this environment, you have to understand the macroeconomic phenomenon known as the freight cycle. The trucking industry operates on a violent boom and bust cycle that typically lasts between 3 and 5 years. We saw this play out in spectacular, historic fashion and during the early part of the 21st century's third decade. When the global pandemic hit, consumer spending abruptly shifted away from services and exploded into physical goods. Suddenly, every retail company on Earth was desperately trying to restock their warehouses at the exact same time. The volume of freight completely overwhelmed the available supply of trucks. Spot market freight rates skyrocketed to historic highs, hitting $3, $4, or even $5 per mile. Trucking companies were suddenly swimming in massive, unprecedented cash reserves. Thousands of company drivers looked at these numbers, quit their jobs, went to dealerships, bought expensive trucks at inflated prices, and established their own independent operating authorities to capture the spot market gold rush. But this massive influx of new carriers created the ultimate economic trap. By late 2022 and moving deep into 2023 and 2024, the market experienced the inevitable, devastating freight recession. Consumer spending normalized back toward services, retail inventories became severely bloated, and the overall volume of freight dropped significantly. But the supply of trucks on the road was now at an all-time high. You had too many trucks chasing too little freight. Spot market rates crashed violently, dipping below $2 a mile, while the price of diesel fuel and commercial truck parts remained heavily inflated due to structural macroeconomic pressures. This period became known as the Great Deflationary Squeeze. Small trucking companies found themselves in a horrific position where the cost to operate their truck, including fuel, insurance, maintenance, and debt service, was hovering around $1.95 per mile, while the spot market load boards were only paying an average of $1.85 per mile. Every single mile their truck drove down the highway, the business was actively losing 10 cents. If you run 100,000 miles a year under those conditions, you are literally paying $10,000 out of your personal life savings for the privilege of hauling someone else's freight. This massive market imbalance triggered a historic wave of carrier bankruptcies, wiping out thousands of small operations that failed to realize that the boom times of the freight cycle are always a temporary anomaly, not a permanent reality. But even if the macroeconomic freight rates are stable, your individual profitability as a trucking company owner is constantly threatened by a silent, mathematically lethal operational enemy known as deadhead mileage. Deadhead refers to the empty miles your truck has to drive between dropping off one load and picking up the next. You do not get paid a single cent for deadhead miles. If your truck takes a load from Atlanta to Miami for a fantastic rate of $3 per mile, you might think you made a phenomenal business decision. But Miami is what the logistics industry calls a dead freight market, or a consumer market. Florida consumes vast quantities of goods, but it produces almost no outbound industrial or agricultural freight. Once your truck empties out in Miami, there are virtually no loads available to haul back out. You look at the load boards and realize that to secure your next load, your driver has to drive 400 miles completely empty up to Jacksonville. Those 400 miles of deadhead consume roughly 66 gallons of diesel fuel. Add hours of wear and tear to the engine, burn up your driver's legally restricted labor clock, and generate absolutely zero revenue. When you factor those empty miles back into your initial calculation, your fantastic $3 a mile rate from Atlanta to Miami drops to an effective rate of $1.75 per mile for the entire trip, dragging your business back down below the break-even line. To run a profitable trucking company, you cannot just look at the rate of the load in front of you. You have to possess an intimate, highly strategic understanding of the geographic freight geometry of the country, ensuring your truck never enters a dead market without charging an extreme premium up front to cover the cost of the inevitable empty escape trip. The final, and perhaps most mentally exhausting, component of owning a trucking company is the human capital and regulatory nightmare. If you choose not to drive the truck yourself, you have to hire a driver. The commercial trucking industry faces a perpetual, systemic driver retention crisis. Long-haul over-the-road trucking is a brutal, isolating lifestyle that forces workers away from their families for weeks at a time, living out of a small bunk beds in truck stop parking lots. Because the lifestyle is so demanding, the annual driver turnover rate for larger fleets routinely hovers around 90%. To secure a reliable, safe driver who possesses a clean commercial driver's license and a spotless safety record, you have to pay a premium wage, typically between 60 and 80 cents per mile, or offer a high flat salary. If your driver behaves irresponsibly, idling the truck's engine for hours in warm weather and burning excess fuel, driving aggressively and damaging the tires, or getting a speeding ticket, your company's safety score degrades, which instantly drives your commercial insurance premiums even higher next year. And then you have to contend with the phenomenon of detention time. When your driver arrives at a shipper's manufacturing plant or a grocery distribution warehouse to pick up or drop off a load, they are entirely at the mercy of the warehouse forklift operators. Shippers and receivers routinely treat truck drivers with immense disrespect, forcing them to park their truck in a staging area and wait for 4, 6, or even 8 hours just to get backed up to a loading dock. Because federal hours of service regulations strictly mandate that a commercial driver can only drive for a maximum of 11 hours within a strict 14-hour daily window, every single hour your truck sits idling in a warehouse parking lot is a legal hour of productivity that is violently stolen from your business day. The driver's clock continues to tick down to zero while they sit completely stationary. While most contracts state that a shipper must pay a detention fee of $50 to $100 per hour if they hold a truck for more than 2 hours, actually collecting that money from a powerful corporate shipper or a slippery broker is an uphill battle that requires endless administrative arguing. More often than not, the small carrier simply eats the loss, sacrificing their drivers' valuable legal hours and hemorrhaging potential revenue because of someone else's supply chain inefficiency. This is the hidden structural reality that sits beneath the chrome bumpers and the roaring turbochargers of the highway transportation industry. You are entering an economy of fractions of a penny. To survive as a trucking company owner, you cannot think like a truck enthusiast who loves the open road and the mechanical power of a large diesel engine. You have to think like a cold, calculating logistics optimization algorithm. The financing costs will trap your capital. The emissions systems will betray your maintenance budget. The insurance companies will extract your initial liquidity. The freight brokers will systematically exploit your market desperation during the low points of the freight cycle. And the geography of deadhead mileage will quietly erode your paper profits if you lose focus for even a single week. It is an industry that forms the absolute backbone of global civilization. But the reward for providing that critical infrastructure is a relentless, low-margin war where only the most operationally disciplined, data-driven, and well-capitalized operators manage to stay on the road. If you found this video valuable, leave a like, subscribe, and comment below which business you want me to cover next.